All right, welcome back, everyone. We have Dr. Jennifer Zimmerli from Rockhurst University talking about examining the role of high school esports in student academic performance and attendance. So if you can start to share your screen, we'll make sure everything looks good, and then I'll be handing it off to you.
All right, Dr. Jenny, does everything look good on your end?
Looks great. Take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Just want to take a quick moment to say thank you to you, Dr. Jenny, and the folks at Slippery Rock University, and as well as the Esports Research Network for inviting me out to speak today. And apparently my dog has a lot to say too, now that I'm here. She waited until this moment to state her opinion on being kenneled. But we will progress. So good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Zimmerli. I'm from Rockhurst University in Kansas City. And today I'll be presenting my doctoral capstone research project titled Examining the Role of Esports in Student Academic Performance and Attendance from the Angle of High School Students. So as esports grow rapidly in schools across the United States, educators are asking important questions about its implementation, such as how does this program actually affect students? Are students who participate in esports performing better academically or attending school more regularly? Or does gaming at school risk doing the opposite for students? And so my research sets out to answer those questions using a quantitative approach to measure the relationship between esports participation and both GPA and attendance in a high school setting. And so as I take you through this presentation today, I'm going to show you some excerpts of my poster presentation from Rockhurst. Now, don't panic. I know that it's very small and hard to see on screen. So as my presentation continues, I will actually zoom in on certain blocks so that you can see them in closer detail and expand on the findings so that you have a clearer picture of what they represent. And so zooming in on the first block that I want to share with you today, I want to just put in front of you a QR code to my references for my study. So if you're interested in learning more about the works that support my research, you can follow this QR code with your phone and take a look at those works. And I will refer back to some of these studies over the course of my presentation. And these are the underlying works that really support the direction of my research. And so over the last decade, organized gaming, or what we now refer to today as esports, has become one of the fastest growing extracurricular activities for students worldwide. And high school students are forming teams, competing nationally and sometimes internationally as well, and even earning college scholarships for esports. But despite that growth, the educational community has mixed feelings about esports, and proponents point to potential gains in engagement and belonging as success stories, while critics worry about increased screen time, sedentary behaviors, and the social dynamics of online play. So my goal was to move beyond anecdotal claims and provide evidence-based insight that can help educators make informed, student-centered decisions about whether and how to include esports in school programs. So the purpose for esports, as it was presented to me by industry professionals, was to bring gaming out of the bedroom and basement and into community in a supervised space with other students with shared interests that promote building positive social and emotional relationships while combating toxic online gaming behaviors. But however, we're finding as educators that esports is capable of doing even more than that, as my study explores. And so the point of my study, the purpose is to quantify these effects of esports participation on student academic performance and attendance, and to gather independent data to assess the programs, so to help aid in district policy setting. Now, as I began reviewing the literature for esports, I noticed something striking. Almost all of the existing research on high school esports is qualitative, and we have student interviews, we have focus groups and descriptive case studies, but no data-driven research that quantifies effects on grades or attendance. And at the same time, I found dozens of technology and gaming industry websites repeating identical claims that esports participants have better attendance and higher GPAs. Yet none of those claims cited any source articles or peer-reviewed evidence along with the stated metrics. So this project is designed to fill that gap and to test those claims through actual student data. So the research questions for this study address the following. Question number 1, does esports participation influence student academic performance as measured by GPA? 2, does esports participation influence student attendance? And 3, does the level of esports participation, whether they're competitive or recreational club-based, affect academic performance or attendance? And so, in other words, I wanted to know not only whether or not esports makes a difference, but whether the intensity of play had any bearing on student success or outcomes from participation. And for all research questions, I assumed a null hypothesis. Now, going back to those industry claims, many of the positive claims surrounding esports come from industry advocates. For instance, the High School Esports League and the National School Boards Association have published articles suggesting that esports participants have 10% higher attendance rates and GPAs that are 1.7 points higher than their peers. However, none of these figures are sourced or verified in academic literature. I found more than 50 different websites quoting these same statistics verbatim without any citation. And that discovery underscored for me the need for independent quantitative research from the educational field. Critics of school-based gaming raise valid concerns. They point to potential risks such as excessive screen time, physical inactivity, gender imbalance, online harassment, and mental health challenges among players as concerns. And these concerns are well documented in the literature. For example, we saw a dramatic rise in adolescent screen time during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, proponents of esports argue that, like other extracurriculars, esports can promote engagement, belonging, and even self-regulation skills. And the question is, which of these effects, whether positive or negative, actually show up in measurable academic data? A strong body of research links extracurricular participation in general to higher academic performance and attendance. And studies by Chen, Nifson, Hu, and others show that moderate involvement in sports and clubs correlates with better grades and stronger engagement. And these studies also demonstrate that the benefits are dose dependent. In other words, participating in a few activities is beneficial, but over-involvement can lead to diminishing returns. Esports is a cross-domain activity. It's a hybrid of athletics and technology clubs. And so it may offer similar opportunities for engagement as traditional extracurriculars, especially for students who don't feel connected to traditional sports or school activities. In addition, as a cross-domain activity, esports can lead to increases in social capital, which can lead to increases in belonging as well. So the conceptual framework that I put together for this study was grounded in the established relationship between engagement and academic success. And if esports can build a sense of belonging and motivate students to attend school, then those effects should be observable in GPA and attendance data. So while esports are a new context and the mechanisms of social connection, motivation, and engagement are familiar from decades of extracurricular research. To test these ideas, they used a comparative quantitative design, and the study took place in a mid-sized suburban school district in the Midwest with a population of about 9,500 high school students. I examined 2 semesters of data in the spring of 24 and the fall of 24, covering 4 high schools with esports programs. And together, those programs included 51 students in the spring and 90 students in the fall. So it was growing rapidly from one semester to the next. Students were divided into 2 self-selected groups, either Team A, a competitive group with high-stakes gaming and ranked play, or B, a recreational group with no high-stakes format or ranked play. On this slide, you'll see a sample population breakdown for the study by grade and high school building. Academic performance was measured using students' cumulative GPAs on a 4.0 weighted scale drawn from the district's official student information system. Attendance was measured by the number of students' days absent recorded by teachers and attendance staff in the district, and rounded up for partial days in increments of 0.5 and above. So for comparison, I also used 2 benchmark data points provided by the district. The first one was the total district high school mean for GPA and attendance. And the second one was the State High School Activities Association mean, which represents students involved in high school state-sanctioned athletics and activities as their means for GPA and attendance. And by comparing esports participation to these 2 benchmarks, I could see how they performed relative to both the general population of students and to traditional extracurricular participants. All statistical analyses for this study were conducted using SPSS software. I used one sample t-test to compare esports players' GPA and attendance with the district and state high school activities association means. I then used independent sample t-tests to compare the competitive versus recreational groups. Effect sizes were assessed using Cohen's d to understand the magnitude of any differences in the one sample t-test, and the assumption of not homogeneity of variance was assessed using Levine's test, and where the association was violated, Welch's t-test was used for comparison in the independent sample t-test. So let's take a look at the results of the study. First, I'm going to show you a close-up view of the descriptive statistics for this study, where you can see the means across the groups and the sample sizes across the groups. But I also want to call your attention on this slide while we're here to the minimum maximum GPA scores between the groups. And you will see on this slide in the third column, top row, that minimum GPA for the esports group was a 1.4 GPA, and the maximum was a 4.5 GPA. So we're looking at a broad range of GPA scores. Also, for attendance in table 2, we can see minimum number of missed days of 0 and a maximum number of missed days of 27, which is significant for a student. All right, now time for the results. In addition to the results I will discuss here, I also created some bar graphs for you so you could see the GPA means by groups across those 4 groups that I described: the competitive, the recreational, the state-sanctioned activities group, and the total high school population. All right, so in response to the first question, does esports participation influence academic performance? I found no significant difference between esports students and the total district population in either semester. This means esports participants maintained GPAs comparable to their peers overall. However, their GPAs were significantly lower than those of the state-sanctioned High School Activities Association group. In both semesters, esports participants averaged roughly 0.3 to 0.4 points lower in GPA than their traditional extracurricular activities peers. This result was not unexpected, though, because the state group requires a baseline 2.0 GPA for participation, and the esports group did not do that. As we saw, there were some as low as 1.17. Oh, possible reasons for that are difference, as I just stated, was the discrepancy in the baseline 2.0 GPA. Okay, So for research question number 2, for the second question, does esports participation influence attendance? The findings revealed an interesting nugget as a result. During the spring semester, there was no significant difference between esports students and the district average, but in the fall semester, esports students had significantly better attendance than both the district and state high school athletics and activities association students when compared to their group means. In other words, esports students missed fewer days of school than both the general student body and the traditional extracurricular group in semester 2. So the question then becomes, why did this happen? And that is difficult to pinpoint. There's many possibilities that we'll discuss in a little bit here, but delayed engagement effect could be one reason why. An increase in sample population could lead to that. Greater buy-in from players as the seasons progressed, and changes in how the clubs were formatted could also influence that outcome. For example, there were more game titles introduced in semester 2, which may have had a motivational factor or effect on students in the program as well. Taking a look at question number 3, the third question asks whether competitive versus recreational players experience different outcomes. And the answer to that was no. I didn't find any statistically significant differences in either GPA or attendance between Team A, which was the competitive group, or Team B, the recreational group, in either semester. This finding indicates that the benefits or the risks of participation were similar regardless of the intensity of play. And this is likely because of similarities in how the groups are structured across those two teams. For example, many of the teams shared the same spaces, the same coaches, the same gaming equipment, which may have had a normalizing effect on the data. So I want to pause here for a moment to give you a brief look at that table from my poster design that shows the results of the independent samples t-tests. And here you can see that there were no significant p-values to be found across this group. And next, I will show you the results section from the poster outlining this. I want to call your attention to the second bullet point in the RQ2. For that, it reads that attendance was significantly higher than both of those groups. Coming back to that, I did have a significant p-value in that section. And what's interesting compared to the other values is this indicated that that group of esports players that were compared were unique, and there wasn't much overlap with that KSHSAA group because quite honestly, some students do multiple activities. And so there was some question of whether or not that would factor into the results as well. But this result actually points to them being completely separate groups of students for the most part. So taken together, these results tell a very important story. First, esports participation does not appear to harm academic performance or attendance, so we can put those fears to rest. Second, students in esports maintain academic performance comparable to the general population, and they may show improved attendance over time, which can be used as a tool for engagement for students. Third, the increase in attendance suggests that esports may otherwise engage students who are disconnected from school. And so these findings challenge stereotypes that gaming leads to disengagement or poor academic outcomes. Now, this study, it's also important to note, did not return results that are comparable to industry claims in either GPA or attendance. So all of the results fell well short of those 50 published studies that I found. All right, so let's take a look at some discussions involving how we can interpret this data and understand its meaning. So why might esports participants underperform in academics compared to their peers in state-sanctioned athletics and activities? Well, one reason, as I pointed out, is the GPA requirement, that barrier to participation that the state-sanctioned athletics and activities have of a 2.0 GPA. And so a small group of esports students in both semesters had GPAs well below the required threshold. And this number of students with outlier GPAs grew from semester 1 to semester 2, in effect skewing the data. However, this also reveals that esports tapped into a vein of at-risk students who may stand to benefit the most from esports participation. A second question that's raised by looking at this data is, why might attendance improve over time? And there are a few possibilities, as I mentioned just a moment ago. One is that as programs mature, they build stronger culture and relationships, which promote a sense of belonging. And something research shows directly supports attendance. Another is inclusivity. And unlike the state-sanctioned activities, the esports in the district did not require that minimum GPA, and that lack of barrier, the openness, may have invited students in. It may have drawn them in when they were not connected to other school activities. And for those students, esports could be a valuable entry point into community with other school peers. Now, there are I'm sorry, I read ahead on this slide, but I'll pause here for a moment while you read this. It just restates what I've already said about the benefits and risks of esports and what we learned from the data. So moving on to the limitations of this study, there are, of course, a number of important ones to mention. So this study focused on just one district over only 2 semesters and with a relatively small sample size of students. And the demographic data were intentionally excluded to protect student privacy because that eased re-identification. We wanted to avoid that. That meant that I couldn't analyze any factors like gender or socioeconomic status or disability that could impact outcomes as well. And the study also did not control for GPA, as we've discussed. So additionally, it's important to note that cumulative GPAs, one, they build upon each other, and it takes longer, two, to move them over time. They become fixed. And so it's hard to see a big increase in GPA over 1 or 2 periods in the school year. And so when we see that improvement of attendance, sometimes there's a delayed effect where academic achievement may take longer to emerge in the data because of the nature of how it's calculated. So future research with larger, more diverse samples is really recommended here for longitudinal design and to confirm these results and extend these findings. Right now, this study is not scalable or generalizable at its size, but it does serve as a baseline for future study. So despite these limitations, the findings have clear implications for educators and students. First, esports programs, as we found, are not hurting students' GPAs or attendance in terms of their performance. Second, they provide that powerful engagement tool that we discussed, especially for students who aren't otherwise involved in other school activities. And districts who are looking for innovative strategies to combat chronic absenteeism, which is plaguing high schools today, they might consider esports as a vehicle for connection and innovation as well. And finally, I think it's important to state that removing barriers for participation, such as academic eligibility standards, may improve access for at-risk learners and provide a pathway to develop belonging with the school community. So moving forward, I
Jennifer,
recommend.
we're about out of time here. If we can move into
Okay.
the Q&A. If you have anything pressing that you want to mention before we move into the Q&A, go ahead.
No, I think I've covered all the important details. The one thing that I would close on for this, these restate the obvious, but I would like to leave people with this thought: as educators, it's our responsibility to meet students where they're at. And for many of today's students, that place is digital. And so esports provides that bridge between their interests in the school community. So thank you.
Awesome.
Yes, I'm happy to entertain any questions that anyone has. Are you
Sure.
able to do those for
Yeah,
me,
I can
Dr.
read them. The first one is a comment. It says, "I'm thrilled to see this level of statistical analysis and see the method broken down. This would be a very valuable lesson for any student as part of their research methods curriculum." So positive praise on, for you.
Thank you very much.
The next question, if you had a few minutes to tell a school administrator about the most important information and results of your study, what would you highlight to them and why?
I think that we're seeing a lot of inappropriate behaviors of students in school, and I work with students directly through an esports program, and I can see how esports is changing student behavior in a positive way, especially with self-regulation skills. And so if you're struggling with behaviors and getting kids to come to school, esports could be an outlet to explore.
Awesome. Next one, I think it's this is Oliver Lease. Alibaba 24, what would be the next steps you'd like to take with this research moving forward?
Well, interestingly enough, I have another semester and soon a second one coming of data on the shelf. And so my hope is to continue this study and take another look at a third semester based in this format. The program changed format in semester 4, so we can see how it evolves over time. And so just keeping a look at that shelf data to see how it's progressing would be my next step, I believe.
Another question, if this study were replicated, would you consider how psychological factors may play a role?
Yes, absolutely. So I think a mixed method study of including some qualitative inquiry in the form of surveys and trying to assess how students' perceptions of gaming and participation in the clubs is important to include. Of course, larger sample sizes are more appropriate for that with the risk of re-identification, but that would be something that I would like to include in the future as well.
Great. And last question here. You've mentioned that you may have mentioned this, but did the esports program directors require a minimum GPA above the 2.0 for participation, and or did they have attendance requirements beyond the school minimums?
No, in the first 2 semesters, which or based on the study, no, there were no GPA or attendance requirements for participation. However, in the 4th semester, which we have not researched yet, there has been a change that we've instituted at basically the state high school athletics and activities association picked up esports as one of their approved athletics or activities. And so that 2.0 GPA will take effect, but we are working to include access to students as a club within that space as well, so that they're not excluded.
Gotcha. And that's the state of Illinois?
No,
What
it's the
state?
state of Kansas.
Kansas. I gotcha. Okay, sorry.
No, that's
Couldn't
okay.
remember. All right. All right. Well, we are going to get set up for the next presentation. So if you don't mind, stop sharing your screen, and we're going to get set up for Thomas and Gabriel from the University of Ottawa in Canada. Hopefully, they're going to give their presentation in English, but I know they both speak French, so we'll see. From
All
Trash
right.
Talk, yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Really appreciate you sharing your insights.
Thank you for having me out today. Good luck with the rest of your conference.
Yeah, and feel free to jump on the Twitch chat and respond to any other further comments that there might be in there.
Will
So
do. Thank you very
thank
much.
you.
Have a great afternoon.
You too. Thomas and Gabriel's presentation is titled From Trash Talk to Threats, Rethinking Platform Accountability for Toxicity in Online Games. So stick with us, continue to engage in the Twitch chat. If you haven't followed us on Twitch, please give us a follow. If you can check out our website, esportsresearch.net, where you can scroll down to the bottom of the main page and become an Esports Research Network member. There's no fee for that. That can be a full membership, is a doctoral or PhD student and an affiliate